Hi, everybody. This is AVP Alicia. I'm joined by my husband, Jack. We have a special guest, Robbie Ferguson.
Right.
So, we know you do a lot of tech stuff. Can you explain what you do in simple terms?
Yeah, I've been a tech YouTuber since as long as I can remember. So we've been broadcasting for 16, 17, 18 years ish. So back before YouTube was really a household name, we were there. So that's kind of where we started. I've been doing YouTubing, if you will, ever since then. But I'm also a software developer. I do a lot of coding. We do NEMS Linux and all kinds of great projects, Pinecraft, Minecraft servers for Raspberry Pis, like all kinds of fun stuff. So Alicia, if I was to summarize what I do, just have fun, tinker, have
Very
a blast,
cool.
share with the community.
Nice. So, I see that you're a fan of many franchises. What are some of them?
I'm sorry?
So, you're a fan of many franchises.
Franchises,
yeah. Yeah.
What are some of your favorites and why?
Oh, wow. Okay, of course, the Orville. And why? I grew up as, I like to say I grew up on NCC 1701B. And I guess, maybe that's a little bit of a connection to Seth and his, creation of the Orville. But when the Orville was first announced, it was meant to be, it was presented as a spoof. Like this was going to be a TNG spoof.
Right,
so it's
like Family Guy in space.
Yeah, we all know Seth MacFarlane, and we thought, this is going to be a lot of fun, and it was. But then it really found its own as a sci-fi, and so I was along for the ride. And being the tech geek that I am, I kind of got involved with some of the communities there. So that's a big one. Wow, what other franchises? Wendy's, yeah.
Wendy's is good.
Big Bacon Classic.
Yes,
I love those Baconators.
Yeah, I'm really big on cybersecurity. So I like to, I've got a very security first mindset as far as my approach to technology. So a lot of my off TV franchises that I'm interested in have to do with security or development, those kinds of things. So that could be anything from single board computing. So that includes the new Raspberry Pi 5 and developing for that platform. I'm working with a company right now that I can't reveal too much information about yet, but we're in development working on some artificial intelligence that's going to be household runnable, if you will. So again, in that kind of maker single board computing space. So those kinds of projects and those kinds of companies, I love to kind of keep up with what they're doing. Pine 64, Ameridroid has got their Indie Droid Nova. So single board computers, working with the GPIO, creating sensors. I'm a huge, as the developer of NEMS Linux, which is an enterprise asset monitoring operating system for single board computers and enterprise appliances and things. I love making sensors for that platform. So that could be thermal sensors or moisture sensors, things to tell me when my servers are having problems and those kinds of things. So not really a franchise per se, but kind of like a space within Maker Tech that I really, really enjoy. So I spend a lot of my free time working within that space.
Okay, cool.
And so, so have you worked with AI yet? Because I know that's the big thing nowadays.
My development capabilities are and my experience are CPU based. So very I'm Python, PHP, and the purists are like, that's not programming. Python, Bash, a lot of Bash, and a lot of the stuff that I do is to operate NEMS Linux, the operating system. So C++, Bash, and Python, a lot of PHP. But the AI end is something that I think a lot of us developers are really just we're having to learn, we're having to study, we're having to do a lot of trial and error. So I've worked on a couple of projects so far, nothing that is possible to be released to the public yet, but that's the inevitable goal. So my first project is a time card replacement that uses facial detection to recognize when staff are coming and going and clocking them in and out automatically. So very, very basic, but that tied into my NEMS Linux appliance and through the automation, like home automation and things like that. We can do things like setting up environments so that when I enter the studio, the lighting setup that I like is automatically applied to our smart bulbs and things like that.
Oh, okay.
When somebody else enters, it might be a different lighting
It
environment,
changes.
for example. Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
that's actually a product that I created for single board computing again. That is that's an interesting one because it uses the CPU. But now I'm getting more into the NPU end of things as well.
Okay. So technology plays a key role in your line of work. What
Yeah,
inspired
right.
you to start working in it?
Sorry?
What inspired you to work in it?
Oh, working in tech? Yeah. The inevitable start of my desire to work within the tech realm, it comes from when I was just a very young lad. I got a VIC-20 from Commodore when I was 4 years old and was programming that using the basic programming language that evolved into, like at 5 years old, I'm creating my own games. So, which like these days, so that was kind of unheard of back then, but now it's like I see my kids and they're doing Roblox and they're coding and they're doing Scratch programming and stuff like that at the same like early age that I was. So I'm just like, I can't imagine how far along they're going to be when they're, my age. So it's just an amazing evolution of what technologies are available to us as we're learning. But so I started there, got my first PC, and I was a hardware hacker right out the gate because computers didn't have things like sound cards. So you gotta install that yourself and get it working and all that kind of stuff. So very, very young age, I was doing hardware upgrades and things like that. And then got into like expanding my programming capabilities with GW Basic and Q Basic, moving into web programming languages as a young adult, starting with PHP and becoming extremely well versed at PHP. So that was something that I did professionally for many, many years. And then and now with NEMS Linux and everything else that I do, I'm coding in all kinds of languages. But it started with that VIC-20, which
Very
these
cool.
days the equivalent is a single board computer.
Nice.
That's impressive. Yeah.
So who inspired you to do it?
Just tech in general.
Yeah.
It's an odd question, Alicia, or not an odd question, but it's an odd one for me to answer because I don't really know who sparked that passion.
Okay.
Have you had anyone who influenced you, perhaps?
Oh, tons. And I can touch on that. But looking back at those early days of computing, it's like, where did those computers come from, right? Like, because you think, okay, well, if like a really terrible by today's specs computer back then was $2,000, it's like, where did my parents get the money to buy that? How did that even come about? So it's like I've never asked that question. I'm very kind of curious now. But when I was a teenager, I was working for a retail store, and they were looking, and I had some experience in programming and operating with computers and stuff. So I ended up helping them with their surveillance system and setting up cameras and getting into the kind of like hands-on and operational end of things. And I've just always been a tinkerer. And I'm also a perfectionist, which is a terrible thing for a tinkerer to be, because you lose sleep with every idea. Like I try to read a book and I just can't focus. I'm reading the same sentence over and over again because I've got this idea for what I want to program next. So it's tough, but I make it work.
It's hard for us perfectionists, I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, sounds a little bit like OCD a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. But so I try to juggle, that desire to, always finish what I start with. I work with with communities, so part of how I've learned to I don't know if juggle it is the term, but the way that I've learned to approach the projects that I do is that I
Hmm.
pretty much give them away to the community. So I do a lot of open source contributions.
Nice.
My YouTube channel, of course, you don't have to pay to watch a YouTube channel kind of thing. So, and we do crazy stuff. So that's my other passion is the video creation, because on YouTube, like I was saying just before, I mean, if I can step back here, because I'm at my studio, can you folks see if I just kind of like pull this little bar right here? Is that
Yep.
moving?
Yeah.
Yep.
So like,
We
so when
catch
we
some
jump
green
onto the
screen.
yeah, and when we jump onto the studio set, we then take all of our videos and we bring them into Unreal Engine, and that's like it's free because I don't make $1 million.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Unreal Engine did this.
yeah, so what I'm able to do, me and my friends, my team, we're able to create virtual environments that are endless, and we can just do anything that we want. There,
Nice.
there was a time, I don't know, about 10 years ago, because I've been a YouTuber for a long time. I had somebody say to me, can you do visual effects to make it look like you're doing this? And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. But then the OCD end of me says, I wonder how. And so now, here I am 10 years later, and what am I doing? Videos that are taking place. Our most recent one is in the Stranger Things universe, where Vecna is
Yes.
there. We've animated him, and complete interaction between virtual and reality. So the stuff that we're doing now is like, it's crazy. It's absolutely wild
Yes,
and fun.
absolutely. So, what advice would you have for someone that would be interested in the technology aspect of work?
Wow. It really will depend on your age, but I believe that the best advice that I could give, just off the top of my head, because we didn't lay out these questions beforehand or anything like that, but I believe it's important just to never be afraid to fail, which, if you're not afraid to fail, you're not afraid to try new things and experiment. But when you do fail, just be willing to either move on or be willing to try again, whichever one is the most appropriate for the time. Because sometimes, if you fail at computing something or doing some kind of tech, then maybe it's time to try something new, or maybe it's
Hmm.
time to just retrace your steps as a programmer. How many times am I going back over my work and fixing things? I'm working through bugs today on new software. So, but
Yeah.
I think just, and the perfectionist in me has always had trouble with this, just being okay with failure, um,
Hmm.
because it's inevitable. But
Right.
Right.
it doesn't mean I'm a failure. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means that we're learning, and we're all
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah. And
So
yes, I know how that feels because we saw your unboxing of the Orville. We have the
oh
same
yeah,
we have the same Orville, but we have a problem. My stand is broke.
oh no.
And
So do you have a 3D printer?
I do not have a 3D printer, and so
Oh
I can't 3D print my own. And
yeah,
I've looked over at some sites, and it's kind of expensive. So,
yeah. Wow.
but
Yeah, I
yeah.
wonder.
So I'm trying to. So eventually, I'll figure out a way to either like cement this back on,
Mhm.
because I've been gluing it over and over, and it keeps falling off.
Oh
But
dear.
one of these
Yep.
days, we'll have a stand, and we'll be able to put that with the rest of our ships.
For sure. Ours are on display. Just I can see them where I'm standing. There's a shelf over there that has. I've got the Orville and I've got the Kalon battle cruiser or whatever they call it,
Yes.
and a couple of the comic books as well. Um,
Yes,
but fortunately, nobody touches them, and so they're just there, safe and
yes.
not going to get
Right.
broken. Because that Kalon ship looks like the fins could be easily broken.
Oh
I can
yeah,
grab it.
we got the same ship too.
Do you have that one as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
And this one, see, and here I go. I say nobody touches it, and I just touched it for the first time and already dropped the stand. But like that is so cool.
That
Can you
is.
see
It looks
that?
like a giant eyeball coming straight at you, like.
Yeah. But I just fear like if anyone touched these fins, it's definitely going to break. So I keep it very, very safe. We keep, it's kind of on display here at the studio just to kind of remind us of where we come from, because we had Tom and Brooke on our show and
Nice,
talked about
nice.
kind of behind the scenes, how they created the Orville back in the day. So that's really meaningful to me as a content creator to have had them on the show.
That's cool.
Definitely.
We've talked to Tom before. He's a great guy.
Oh,
And
is
I
he ever?
interviewed Brooke myself. She's wonderful.
Oh yes, and so they're both so talented, and
They
that they're so down to earth. Like
Mhm.
Tom representing the Orville community and connecting with the fans while still being so deeply involved. It's just like so. I don't know. It's like a shift. It shows the possible shift, and right now we're going through the opposite with X. But Tom really showed what a community can be like,
Yes.
and never really lost sight at all. But so
That's
many
true.
companies, so many fandoms lose sight of their fans.
That's
And
very true.
That's very true.
yeah, so the Orville has been really representative of a
Yes.
good community. Yeah.
It's one of my
Yes.
favorites. It's part of what brought us together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yes, that fandom is the opposite of other certain fandoms where it's like if you have a problem with something on there, suddenly everyone's offended and pissed off.
Yeah, right. It's Trekker. No, it's Trekkie. Like, why do we fight? Why do we fight?
I don't know.
It's all petty, unfortunately.
In the end, it is.
I joke. Yeah.
Yes. So you mentioned that you interacted with Tom and Brooke. Who are some of the others you've interacted with that are famous?
Famous? Well, Mark Shuttleworth, the creator of Ubuntu Linux. He's a multi-billionaire who self-funded a flight to the space station.
Nice.
First South African to do so. And in the early days of my show, he came on the show to talk about this up-and-coming Linux stuff that he was doing, and now it's like he's like, who doesn't know the name Ubuntu when it comes to Linux desktop operating systems? So he's done really, really well, and it was really, really cool to have in the early days of my YouTube channel to be able to speak with him. And I don't, I've spoken with so many people that I don't want to like name people off and then forget somebody, but and our show has never been about like interviewing famous people. It's just the inevitable course of like talking about tech. We sometimes get to speak with some pretty cool people, authors and all kinds of folks. Like Douglas Preston is a New York Times bestselling author that comes to mind. He was on the show. So,
Nice.
So we branch out of tech as well. So
of course. So what is your education background?
Self-taught.
Ooh,
and
okay.
That's the best way.
Well, with tech, definitely. If you're committed to learning, and if you're able to actually take the time and work through problems, and if you can troubleshoot, that's like a key asset in tech, is learning to be a good troubleshooter. That's what's going to get you far. And I started in the industry at 14, so and I've been in it ever since. So that's the path that my life has taken.
That's cool. So what are some of the challenges that you face in your line of work?
Technical or non?
Either.
End users, lack of adoption of new technologies, fear of new technologies. Like right now, we're at the shift where AI can become a very strong tool if used correctly.
Right.
But there are those who would use it nefariously and in ways that it should never be used. And that's giving it a bad reputation, if you will. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there's a lot of movies that, like the Terminator movies. Yeah, like they warn you. So
right.
Yes.
But as a tool, that's just one example. As a tool, artificial intelligence can be extremely helpful, powerful, and supplemental to our efforts as humans to create, to be able to just in our workplace and our personal lives. But that's just an example of something that it's really easy to fear the evolution of that technology, and we see. In industry and in enterprise, you see a lot of like fear of adoption of, the previous one was the cloud. We don't want to move everything to the cloud. Well, then their Exchange server failed and they lost all their emails. So there's always this fear of adopting new technology, and that's a big challenge, Alicia, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Can you describe a typical workday for you?
Typical workday. Well, I get up at 5 a.m. and hit the highway at 6:15 and drive for an hour and a half and get to my office. And then I work in IT, and I help fix people's problems and upgrade the servers and do all kinds of stuff throughout my day and support users. And then I come back home. I go to my studio. I work on my show. I work on my Linux software coding and everything, and then I spend time with my family in between. So my days are not very typical. Pretty busy. Yeah, there's not enough hours in the day, but one thing's for sure, I make sure and I make an effort to because it's very easy to become a workaholic. It's very easy to disappear to your computer all the time. So I make an effort to make sure that there are always set times that I've got time with my wife and kids. I disconnect when I'm at home, and sometimes jump on my phone or my laptop if I need to. But generally speaking, I'm unavailable to work. So it's about balance, but my days are all over the place. So
sounds good. So how did you discover the various tech you talk about on your show?
So on Category 5 Technology TV, it's always been like talking about, so up until the pandemic, it was about like talking about the technologies that we're using in our day-to-day lives, things that we've discovered, new tech, various things that we're actually using and learning and then sharing with our viewers. The pandemic happened, and that caused us to switch the paradigm completely. So we became more of a produced show because we couldn't have at that time we couldn't have our staff on the set together. You remember what lockdowns were like. So during lockdown, it was neat because we were able to put everyone on green screens, bring them all together onto the same virtual set, and produce our show. So, but it changed the paradigm as far as what we could do. So we started doing more product reviews and features where we would demonstrate products, but also really putting a focus on taking products to the next level. So right now I'm working on this artificial intelligence for single board computer NPUs. So we've got rock chip devices that, it's going to branch out from the board that we're demonstrating to all kinds of devices that have an NPU, neural processing unit. So by creating this product, then the show becomes a demonstration platform where we can show people how to use it, and then we give it away for free, whether it's on our GitHub or whatever. So the show has kind of evolved into also that, where we can show how to use products that we create or that other folks have created and want to demonstrate on our show as well.
Okay, cool.
That's nice.
Because your question specifically, Alicia, was like, where do the ideas come from? And when it comes to those like new products, it comes from one of two places. One, I discover that something that should exist does not exist. Or two, I discover that something that does exist is inaccessible to the community at large. So the first one is obvious. If something has not been created, like the time punch card, I'm sure some AI company has made it, but generally speaking, that's not something I've heard of, being able to detect people as they're coming and going and punch them in and out of the time clock. So that's something that I don't know that exists, so I'm creating it, and it's freely available on my GitHub. But the other one is something that does exist, but costs too much or is inaccessible. Like there are products out there that cost thousands and thousands of dollars a year for users to use. So I create something that's feature similar that is free. I guess you could compare it to like Linus Torvalds when he created Linux, and it was like the alternative to Unix, and Unix being like this astronomically expensive operating system at the time. So I do I'm not comparing myself to Linus, but saying that it's a kind of a similar mindset or paradigm where I'm creating products that are feature similar, but I give away for free.
Sounds good.
It's a good service.
I hope so. Fun.
Yes. And what are your vision a 3D printer? Do you still have that?
I do, yes. So my uses for it. So this past week, we had an event at our studio, and we have an A-frame sign that has been in storage over the winter, and the casters on the A-frame sign got broken in storage.
Ooh.
So I got my caliper out and I measured, and you can pay $40 for new casters. Who cares? Nobody's moving it around, right? So I just used a caliper. I measured and I created new feet for it that are just flat feet, and 3D printed them so it wouldn't damage the carpet. I took, we have here, we're always moving our cameras around in the studio, especially when we have events. So I 3D printed a base for our tripod that has built-in power, USB-C, and casters, so that we can then wheel the whole kit out of the studio so that it moves into storage. So all kinds of functional stuff. I'm not a 3D, like I'm not a creative designer. So my prints are very functional usually. I'm not somebody who can like do a dragon or something like that.
Sure, of course.
Very, very functional stuff.
Makes
so
sense.
Again, looking for or finding needs. But one of the things that I really like about using the 3D printer is that when something like the casters break on an A-frame, I can just design and print something to fix it, and I don't have to, like, they were 14 cents each, and I printed 4. So it's super cheap, super easy. And I just kind of, anytime I find needs like that, I just create it, print it. And then what do? I put my designs online for free download so that other people can use them.
Nice.
That's good. So you've never patented or trademarked any of your stuff, huh?
No, the only quote unquote proprietary things that I currently work on is that we do have cloud services available, which clearly are, for security reasons, they're running on their own infrastructure, and the source code is not released. But the actual like applications and everything else, I just open source it. It gives back to the community, so other folks are able to use it.
That's wonderful.
That's good.
Cheers.
One last thing I have in mind is, in your bio mentions that you created an NEMS Linux.
NEMS, yeah.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that?
That's so what it is it's an enterprise monitoring server for, so it's technically an enterprise application that allows you to monitor like your server environment, your network devices, your data center, your edge routers, those kinds of things. But again, because I've created it and distributed it for free, you can install it on a Raspberry Pi and use it at home to monitor your plants and the moisture of the soil, and automatically trigger a pump to feed your plants whenever, and throw you an email or something, so it's a monitoring system that runs on all kinds of devices, especially like Raspberry Pis, Pine 64 devices, Odroids, those kinds of things. The EnduDroid Nova has a build as well. And then we have enterprise editions for ESXi, Amazon Web Services, Proxmox, and just a VMDK that you can throw on like a Hyper-V, for example. So it's that's my passion project. That's where I spend a lot of my time coding.
Okay, cool.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think we got everything we need here. So,
But
Awesome.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Jack.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being here for this.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Thank you for
So have a
having me.
good one. You too.
Thank you too.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.